Assalamu alaikum, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you to another session of Ask Dr. Saleem. In this series, we take your questions and we post them towards Dr. Saleem. You may raise your hands or type your questions in the chat to ask them, and you may ask them in either English or Urdu. However, the answers will be given in English unless told otherwise. And so, without any further ado, we can get started with the questions. We're still waiting for, I think we'll have to wait a bit for questions. I wonder if people are having trouble logging in because we only have one participant today.
I hope our link is working or the link is not changed.
Okay, I'd like to reiterate that if anybody has any questions, you may raise your hand or type them in the chat. And if you'd like to remain anonymous, you can send them directly to me, and that way I will read them out. Ahmed, please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
सर मेरा क्वेश्चन था कि एक किताब के अंदर मैंने पढ़ा था हुज्जत हदीस के हवाले से, तो वहाँ पर उन्होंने ये लिखा था कि जो खबर वाहिद है इससे यकीनी इल्म भी हासिल होता है, और उसमें उन्होंने मिसाल दी थी कुरान से कि कुरान में ये बयान हुआ है कि हुदहुद जो एक परिंदा था, जब वो हजरत सुलेमान अलैहिस्सलाम के पास मलिका सबा की खबर लेकर आया, तो उस वक्त वो ये बयान करता है कि मैं तुम्हारे पास यकीनी खबर लेकर आया हूँ, जबकि वो एक ही खबर वाहिद उसे तस्वुर किया जाएगा क्योंकि वो एक खुद ही अकेली खबर लेकर आया है। तो अगर हम ये कहते जी जी
देखें, ये जो वाकया है ये तो कुरान मजीद ने बयान किया है, और ये तो नहीं हम कह सकते कि जो खबर वाहिद है वो हमेशा ही इसके अंदर कोई इम्कान होता है कि वो झूठ वो हो या सच हो। असल में इसके बारे में जो मुहद्दिसीन वो ये कहते हैं कि यहतमिलु सिद्क वल किज़्ब, सच भी हो सकती है और झूठ भी हो सकती है। तो ये तो नहीं कहा जाता कि लाजिमन झूठ होगी, नहीं, ये तो किसी ने नहीं कहा। नहीं, सच होने का इम्कान होता है और झूठ होने का भी इम्कान होता है। तो चूंकि सच होने का इम्कान होता है और झूठ होने का भी इम्कान होता है, اس وجہ سے اس کی تحقیق کی جاتی ہے۔ یہ ہدہد اگر ایک سچی خبر لے کے آئے ہیں اور اس خبر کو قرآن مجید نے رپورٹ کیا ہے تو وہ ٹھیک ہے، بالکل درست ہوگی، لیکن اس کے درست ہونے سے یہ لازم نہیں آتا کہ تمام خبر واحد جو ہیں وہ درست ہوں گی۔ یہ تو ویسے ہی ہے نا کہ میں اکیلا کہیں جاؤں، ساتھ والے مثال کے طور پہ دیکھیے جگہ پہ میں کہوں جی کہ یہاں اس وقت ہنگامہ ہو رہا ہے، آپ لوگوں کی ضرورت ہے، میں تنہا آتا ہوں اور میری گواہی ہے تنہا، اور لوگ مجھے میرے بات سنتے ہیں اور میرے پاس آ جاتے ہیں۔ اور پھر ایک اور بات یہ بھی ہے کہ اصل میں خبر واحد یہ تو ایک واسطے سے ہے، یعنی ایک شخص گیا ہے یا ایک پرندہ گیا ہے اور ایک خبر لے کے آ گیا ہے۔ ہم تو جس خبر واحد کی بات کر رہے ہیں اس میں 8 9 10 12 واسطے ہوتے ہیں، جس کے اندر اصل میں ایک شخص ایک بات کو سنتا ہے اور اس کو بیان کرتے ہیں۔ یہاں تو وہ شخص عینی گواہ ہے، یعنی یہ خبر واحد کی مثال اس لیے نہیں بنتی کہ ایسا تو نہیں ہے نا کہ نبی صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کی بات ایک صحابی رپورٹ کر رہے ہیں اور بات وہیں رہ گئی ہے۔ یعنی خبر واحد ہم تک تو صحابیوں کے ذریعے صحابہ کے ذریعے سے نہیں پہنچی، کئی درجوں میں پہنچی ہے۔ تو دو باتیں ہیں، ایک یہ کہ لازماً سچ یا جھوٹ کے بارے میں کہا جاتا ہے، سچ بھی ہو سکتی ہے اور جھوٹ بھی ہو سکتی ہے، اور دوسری بات یہ ہے کہ تنہا اس میں ایک آئی وٹنس اکاؤنٹ نہیں ہوتا، بلکہ ایک پوری کی پوری حدیث کا جو ذخیرہ ہے اس میں کوئی آپ کو آئی وٹنس اکاؤنٹ نہیں ملے گا۔ یعنی ایسا نہیں ہوگا کہ ایک واسطہ ہوگا اور پہلا ہی واسطہ ایک چیز ریکارڈ کر رہا ہے، بلکہ یہاں تو واسطے در واسطے ہوتے ہیں، تو اس وجہ سے بہت فرق ہے ان دونوں چیزوں میں۔
جی جی بالکل، تھینکس اللہ۔
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, حدیث میں مباشرات کو وضاحت کی باقیات قرار دینے کی وضاحت کر دیجیے۔
وہ روایت ہے نا کہ لم یبقى من النبوۃ الا المبشرات، اس کا مطلب یہ ہے کہ نبوت جو ہے اس کا تو معاملہ ختم ہو چکا ہوا ہے، prophethood has been terminated، اور اللہ تعالیٰ کے پیغمبر نے یہ کہا کہ زیادہ سے زیادہ اب جو اخبار اللہ تعالیٰ کی طرف سے آ سکتے ہیں، یعنی کہنے کا مطلب یہ ہے کہ اللہ تعالیٰ اب کلام نہیں کرتے، لیکن زیادہ سے زیادہ ہو سکتے ہیں، جو ہو سکتا ہے وہ یہ ہے کہ آپ کو اچھے خواب آ سکتے ہیں۔ لیکن اچھے خوابوں کے بارے میں بھی جب وہ خواب سچا ہوگا اور آپ ہائنڈ سائٹ میں اس کو دیکھیں گے کہ ہاں یہ سچا خواب تھا، تب اس کے بارے میں آپ یقین کریں گے کہ ہاں اللہ کی طرف سے ہو سکتا تھا یہ، یا اللہ کی طرف سے تھا۔ لیکن جب وہ پہلے مثال کے طور پہ آپ کو کوئی بشارت ملتی، بشارات مطلب بشارت دینے والے، خوشخبری دینے والے، تو خوشخبری دینے والا جو واقعہ ہے وہ تو 10 ہو سکتے ہیں۔ تو اس وجہ سے ہم تحقیق سے یہ نہیں کہہ سکتے جب کہ آپ نے خواب دیکھا ہو کہ یہ اللہ کی طرف سے ہے۔ ہاں جب وہ اگر پورا ہو جائے کوئی ایسی چیز جو آپ کو خواب میں دکھائی گئی ہے تو ہم یہ نسبتاً کہہ سکتے ہیں اللہ کی طرف ہے یہ۔ اس کا مطلب کیا ہوا کہ جب واقعہ آپ نے اس کی تصویر اپنے خواب میں دیکھی، اس وقت تک کچھ پتہ آپ کو نہیں تھا، لیکن اگر وہ سچ ہو گیا تو آپ نے آگے جا کے پیچھے مڑ کے دیکھا کہ ہاں یہ میں نے سچا خواب دیکھا تھا۔ تو یہ اس قسم کی چیز ہے، اور یہ استثناء یہاں پہ منقطع کہلاتا ہے۔ اس کا مطلب یہ ہے کہ جیسے ہم کہیں کہ زیادہ سے زیادہ بس یہ ہو سکتا ہے اللہ تعالیٰ کی طرف سے، جیسے ہم کہتے ہیں نا کہ وحی کا کوئی معاملہ تو اب اللہ تعالیٰ نہیں کریں گے، بس زیادہ سے زیادہ یہ ہے کہ آپ کو خوشخبری آپ کے ذہن میں آ جائے گی اللہ کی طرف سے۔ تو یہ زیادہ سے زیادہ کہ ایک اسلوب کو بیان کرنا ہے تاکہ یہ پتہ چل سکے کہ نبوت جو کہ اصل میں اللہ تعالیٰ سے ہم کلام ہونے کا نام ہے، جس کا مطلب ہے خدا آپ سے بات کر رہا ہے، خدا آپ کو اپنے میسیجز کنوے کر رہا ہے، وہ ختم ہو چکی ہے۔ تو یہ اصلاً اس خاتمے کا اعلان
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Ahmed, please go ahead.
ہے۔
جی سر، پہلی مثال تو سمجھ آ گئی، لیکن ایک اور مثال دی تھی انہوں نے یہ ثابت کرنے کے لیے کہ جو خبر واحد ہوتی ہے یہ زیادہ مستند ذریعہ ہوتا ہے منتقل ہونے کا اجماع اور تواتر کے مقابلے میں۔ تو انہوں نے صحابہ کرام کے دور سے مثال دی کہ تحویل قبلہ کے وقت ایک صحابی آ کے صحابہ کی جماعت کو بتاتے ہیں کہ قبلہ چینج ہو چکا ہے، تو پھر صحابہ کرام کی جماعت جو ہے وہ نماز کے دوران ہی اپنا قبلہ جو ہے وہ چینج کر لیتی ہیں، یعنی کہ انہوں نے جو تواتر سے طریقہ چلا آ رہا تھا بیت المقدس کی طرف رخ کر کے نماز پڑھنے کا، اسے خبر واحد کی بنیاد پر ریجیکٹ کر دیا۔ تو اس سے وہ ثابت کر رہے ہیں کہ خبر
جی
واحد زیادہ مستند ذریعہ ہوتا ہے۔
ہاں، لیکن دیکھیں یہ ایسا تو نہیں ہے نا کہ صرف صحابی نے ہی اطلاع دی تھی اور وہ یہ واقعہ چینج ہو گیا تھا، یقیناً نبی صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کو وحی آئی ہوگی، اور مزید یہ ہے کہ صحابہ نے بھی اطلاع دی تھی، تو وحی کو فالو کیا گیا ہے، تو وحی تو اللہ کی طرف سے ہے، تو وہ تو ایسے ہی ہوگی۔ یہ تو ایسے ہی ہے کہ ہم کہیں قرآن جو ہے یہ خبر واحد ہے، بھئی قرآن مجید جو ہے وہ پیغمبر نے ہمیں دیا ہے، اور پیغمبر نے ہمیں ہم نے ان کو دیا اور ریکارڈ کر لیا، لکھنے میں بھی ریکارڈ کر لیا اور یاد کرنے میں بھی ریکارڈ کر لیا، تو یہ اللہ کی طرف سے ایک بات آئی ہے۔ تو اللہ کی طرف سے جو بات آئی ہے اس کی تصدیق میں یہ تو نہیں صرف کہا جا سکتا کہ صحابی نے اطلاع دی تھی، یقیناً نبی صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کو بھی اطلاع آ گئی ہوگی، تبھی انہوں نے یہ کام کیا، ورنہ وہ شاید یہ نہ کرتے۔ यानी उनको अल्लाह ताला की तरफ से ये पैगाम आया होगा।
जी जी, जज़ाकल्लाह।
Thank you very much. Our next question asks, wherever in narrations it is said to lower your gaze, for men, some scholars define this sentence as literal. But when it comes to women, it means just to avoid lustful gaze, because we have many narrations where female companions took notice of male companions who are non-mahrams, but we don't have any narrations where men are noticing or looking at women, and Prophet alayhi salam didn't allow looking at women.
First, we have to understand that as far as these narrations are concerned, they are not a composite historical record of whatever happened. It is just the fact that they happen to be reported. Some of them got reported, some of them never got reported. So we must not rely on history in order to interpret and understand the Quran. The Quran is absolutely clear that the words Ghazul Basar actually mean that you should not gaze at the opposite gender with lustful eyes or with any lustful intent. But nevertheless, there are narrations that you can see, and they can be cited that actually the Prophet stopped men from gazing at women. This has happened, and a couple of them have been recorded as well. So I think that too is not absolutely correct, that there are no such narrations. But even if there were no narrations, I'm talking about that. So narrations of something does not mean that everything that happened got narrated, or it could well be that only what happened got narrated, because you see, we are not dependent on these narrations. It's not that the Prophet is explaining something as a responsibility of some Quranic verses, and that is being transmitted to us. So we have discussed this time and again that history and hadith basically is a initiative of the Prophet's companions. It's not something which the Prophet wanted to be transmitted, and it's just that the Sahaba, the companions, wanted to preserve the knowledge of the Prophet, his verdicts, and they did so. And some of them got reported, others did not get reported. And the ones that got reported, you don't have any guarantee that they got reported correctly and rightly. So they had to be investigated. And that is what the scholars of Hadith did. So the correct approach of understanding the Quran is not by looking at the narrations about a particular verse, but to look at the verse directly. So linguistically, yaghzuzna min absarihinna or yaghuzzu min absarihim, used both for the male and the female gender, both refer to the fact that men should not lustfully gaze at women, and also women should not lustfully gaze at men.
Thank you very much for that explanation, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, how to tackle pedophilia or child abuse among Pakistani madaris and schools. People also harass attractive children or adult males in Pakistani society and universities also. Why is that so?
I think this is not something which is peculiar to Pakistan. This is a streak that is found in human beings all over the world. And harassment of the same gender, harassment of the male child by males, this is something that you'll find if you look at the statistics, that it's not specific to countries like Pakistan. This is something present all over the globe. It becomes prominent here because I think one of the reasons is that uh, the way in which people are given religious education is that they are isolated from their homes at a very young age. Let's say at the age of 7 or 8, they get admitted, and the decision to become a scholar of religion is not something that they take themselves, because how can a 7-year-old boy do that? So this decision is primarily taken by their parents, and so once they grow up, they might or might not like the decision of their parents, and some of them psychologically even become revengeful, and it may well be the product of this revengeful mentality that causes them to harass children of their own age as well, or of the same gender. So I think this is something that should not be looked upon as specific to one society. It's an ailment, I would say, a moral ailment that plagues many nations, I would say.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Rafia Khwaja, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Salam. I wanted to ask you that when we travel and when we meet foreigners, Christian Jews, is it our duty to try and convert them to Islam? Or should we just try to make ourselves better and maybe present, but it's not our duty to forcibly tell them that no, your religion is not right, and Islam is the only religion, and you have to convert to Islam. So how does one handle this?
I mean, certainly it's not our duty to convert people. Our duty is to convey the truth. Our duty is to, personify the truth, become good ambassadors of righteousness, become righteous ambassadors of our own religion, and that is all. And that is something what we call as leading by example. And as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. When they see someone of such character, and also if the time comes that there is a question that is being asked, and you are able to reply to that question in a convincing way, in a persuasive way, that can always be something that attracts your person who you're conversing with. So, I mean, always remember that people have been given the responsibility for searching the truth. The quest for the truth is the biggest responsibility that all of us have. So it's our own truth that we should be after, so that we are at least assured of the fact that we have not fallen short of our effort. As far as other people are concerned, all that we need to do is whenever we find that there is time to convey our religion or the purpose of our religion or something that is questionable, and you are able to make that questionable thing, that doubt that a person might have, you might be able to dispel that. So that is all that is required. So it's all situational. But what more is required is that, remember, our accountability is something that which is, it's not going to be shared by anyone. It's something that we will have to face in any case. So it's more important to concentrate on our own accountability. And a part of that is also that whenever you get the chance to convey the truth in a persuasive way, whenever the opportunity knocks at your door, you should be in a position to answer it in a very, very cogent way.
So can we present the Quran, a copy of the Quran in English to them and say, okay, read it? And
Of course we can. I mean, it always is something that is that depends on the occasion. If the occasion is such that you'd like to give them a gift or a present, I mean, it's always remember that things should not look awkward. They should not look out of the ordinary. If the situation is that you're visiting someone, maybe someone is coming to you, and you think that it's an appropriate time to gift something to someone. I mean, these are all things that are naturally and experientially known to people. So just think that it should not look awkward and out of the ordinary.
And then we can answer their questions once they've read the Quran and they want to ask
I mean,
something.
of course, if you think that you are in a position to answer them, you can always take their questions. Otherwise, you can always refer them to authorities.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, क्या शेखैन रज़ियल्लाह ने रसूल अकरम की तदफीन में शिरकत नहीं किया था?
So as far as the burial of the Prophet is concerned, we don't have a lot of details about that. All that we know say clearly is that there was no funeral prayer offered. And as far as the funeral prayer is concerned, it's basically a prayer for the forgiveness of the person who is deceased. But about the prophets of God, we know that they are on a lofty status and they are on a high moral ground, high moral character, and more often than not, in all probability, they have been already forgiven by God for their outstanding efforts. So the way that was adopted for the Prophet was that people would go in groups of 10 and they would read the durood to him or before his dead body. And other than that, who exactly was part of the funeral and who was not is something of a historical detail that personally I have no knowledge of.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, what is your take on theory of evolution? How do Muslims who have less knowledge of science, how can they satisfy themselves that evolution's theory doesn't shatter their beliefs?
I think if you study Surah Sajda verses 7 to 9, I think, so the Quran has its own theory of evolution, its own view about evolution, and the thing that it presents before us is that human beings were always human. They were born. The only thing is that there was an evolution in their own species, and so we can say that initially they were humanoids. They were resembling human, and then they got perfected after some centuries or maybe a lot of centuries. And then after that perfection, one pair was selected as Adam and Eve. So there is a evolution within the species of human being that the Quran records in Surah Sajda. It says, وَبَدَأَ خَلْقَ الْإِنسَانِ مِنْ طِينٍ, that God began creating mankind through mud, through clay. So initially, people would be born directly from the earth, and the earth would act as the womb of the child, of the person, and they would be born in mature adult ages. And the Quran says that this took place for some time, and then the Almighty placed the ability to procreate amongst themselves. This was the second stage. So initially they were born from clay directly, and in the second stage they of course, through their own intimacy, they produced children. And then the Quran says the third stage was in which they were perfected, and sense and reason were given to them, implying the fact that the soul was blown into them. So that was the third stage. And once this happened, of course, this must have happened to a lot of people, but one of those group of people from them, one pair was taken, and that is what we call Adam and Eve, that pair. And from them sprang the rest of the world. So this evolution, you can see, has been presented by the Quran, but it significantly differs from the Darwinian concept of evolution, in which there is an interspecies evolution, and that too from a common ancestor. So Darwin basically posits that you had a common ancestor, and from that ancestor there was an evolution, and it was interspecies evolution, which means that from one species to another species, and so on and so forth. But the Quran, if you look at the aforementioned or referred verses of Surah Sajda, tells us that yes, it did take place, but the evolution took place within the same species. So human beings, they evolved from their own form. And by analogy, we can see that the rest of the animals, maybe also they had the same evolution, that they are always what they were. But within their own species, there was a gradual improvement in their own form. And hence, we can also see that this fossilized record that we have, huge amounts of fossils that have been found by scientists, they actually explain this evolution within the species. So what we can say is that scientific record is in harmony with what the Quran says. So Darwin actually posited something on his own understanding and basis. And just to give you this outline, that he himself was a devout Christian, and in his own biography, he says that for 20 years he waited. He did not want to present this whole theory because he thought that this was against the Bible, and he was a devout Christian. But there was this incident that happened. I'm not going to refer it. You can just read it up. Because of which he was actually forced to actually explain what he had thought. So that was after 20 years that he reached the conclusion that he presented. And other than that, as I said, it was his understanding of this record of species that he came across, or fossil record that he came across. So that is a different story of evolution. The Quranic story of evolution, or the Quranic concept of evolution, as I said, is fundamentally different, in which it talks about evolution within the same species. And that is how human beings came to be human beings. They were initially humanoids. I mean, humanoids means resembling humans, but they were always resembling humans. And within their own category, they developed and evolved. So this is an entirely new concept of evolution which the Quran presents. And I think the fossil record also very nicely fits into this scheme of Quranic evolution.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, do you know if somebody has written a brief intro if the Quran booklet in Urdu, just like the kind that you did in English?
I don't think that I have come across exactly of the same sort as you might be referring, because some of these things that I did pen down are based on the understanding of the Farai school, which includes Ustaz Farahi, Ustaz Islahi, and Ustaz Ghamidi. So it's like a composite understanding of all these three scholars. And so I think that maybe someone will one day translate that so that you can also have that in Urdu. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't think there is something similar to this available at the moment in Urdu.
They wonder if you have any plans of doing the translation in Urdu.
I don't think so. I have enough work in English left for my own self. So whatever life I have left, God has given me, I plan to work on the Hadith book that I'm working on. So I'm on to the fourth volume. So the first three volumes are to be published in the next few months. And the whole corpus of Hadith literature is so huge that I don't think I'll find time to do anything else. So I would be spending more time, and the one that I have at my disposal by God's will, in writing my Hadith book.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Harun Sharum, please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
सर, इस्लाम में अल्लाह के सिवा किसी की कसम उठाना शिर्क है, क्योंकि एज फार एज आई नो जब आप कसम उठाते हैं तो एक अहद करते हैं और अल्लाह को गवाह ठहराते हैं। पर सर, अगर कोई कसम अहद या गवाह ठहराने के सेंस में ना उठाई जाए तो क्या अल्लाह के सिवा किसी की कसम उठाना जायज़ होगा? फॉर एग्जांपल, आई लिव इन इटली, और यहाँ जब आप नेशनैलिटी लेते हैं तो एक कसम उठाते हैं। उस कसम के एग्जैक्ट वर्ड हैं, आई स्वेयर टू बी फेथफुल टू द इटालियन रिपब्लिक। पर सर, वो कसम एक अहद या गवाह ठहराने के सेंस में नहीं होती, बल्कि आप सिर्फ अपना वर्ड दे रहे होते हैं कि आप फेथफुल रहेंगे। तो क्या ऐसे सेंस में अल्लाह के सिवा कोई कसम उठाना जायज़ होगा? क्योंकि इटालियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन अपने रूल्स और कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को और खुदा को अलग अलग रखते हैं। तो वो जाहिर सी बात है, अल्लाह की कसम तो उठा नहीं रहे होते। तो क्या इस ऐसे
हाँ
मौके पे अल्लाह के
जी,
सिवा
आपका सवाल वाज़ेह हो गया जी। बिल्कुल, वहाँ असल में आप ताकीदन कह रहे होते हैं। आप जब वहाँ कहते हैं कि आई स्वे बाय द इटालियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन और वटेवर, जो भी आपके वर्ड्स हैं, वहाँ महज आप अपनी बात की ताकीद कर रहे होते हैं और ये कह रहे होते हैं कि मैं अपने हर्फ से फिरूंगा नहीं, मैं अपनी ज़ुबान से नहीं फिरूंगा। वैसे तो ये होता है बहुत सारे ममालिक में। अगर आप उनसे पूछें कि क्या हम इस ओथ को अपनी होली किताब पर कर सकते हैं, तो आपको मालूम है कि बरतानिया में और यूएस में इसकी प्रोविजंस मौजूद रही हैं। अगर तो ये आप उनसे पूछें और आपकी वो बात को अगर मान लेते हैं तो फबेहा, ठीक है। वरना अगर ये चीज़ मौजूद नहीं है तो ये हल्फ उठाना है। बेसिकली इस हल्फ को उठाने के लिए कोई हर्ज नहीं है कि आपको जो अल्फाज वो दें उनको आप पूरा करें। यहाँ असल में कसम उस मफहूम में नहीं होती जिस मफहूम में हम कसम खाते हैं। यहाँ ये इसको हम हल्फ कहते हैं कि आप अहद करते हैं कि मैं पासदारी करूँगा कवानीन की और लॉज की। तो ये बिल्कुल ठीक है, इसमें कोई हर्ज नहीं है।
थैंक यू सर।
Rashad Shafkat, please go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Sab, some modern day orators, I would call them, they say that the entire Quran was revealed as per the situation that was prevailing. For example, if some of the companions of the Prophet or some of the others living at that time had any questions, a part of the Quran was revealed to answer those questions. Even in individual having some doubt in his heart, the God would answer it by revelation. Is there any support for that in the Hadith literature or anywhere else?
Yeah, there is support for that from within the Quran. So you see, you'll find some verses saying, yes, alunaka, they ask you. So at times, the question that is found amongst in the minds of people or in the atmosphere could be the question of just one person, but because of the gravity of that question, the Almighty thinks that it needs to be answered. And at times, it would be the question that would be in the minds of many people. So from within the Quran, if you just have a Quranic dictionary or maybe an index in which the word yas'alunaka is mentioned, which means they ask you. So without actually citing who they are, I mean, without actually citing whether the question is from specifically a particular quarter, but of course the context will guide you that who that question might be from. But nevertheless, yes, this is one area in the Quran, which the Quran has taken up questions, because it thinks that these questions need to be answered, and in order to assure people, in order to make them satisfied on the word of God, at times these questions are answered. And the Quran itself has actually referred to this as well, when it at one instance has said, yes, aluna فَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. When people ask me, then, O Prophet, tell them that I am close to them. Ujibu da'wat tadda'i, and I reply to their supplications, or I mean, these supplications could be supplications in the form of du'as, and these could be questions that people might have. But such is the importance of those questions that the answer might benefit a whole lot of people. So yes, I think from within the Quran we find this evidence.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Rashad, did you have a follow-up? Okay. I don't think so. Then let's move on to the chat questions. This one asks, तारीखी रिवायात में हज़रत अली के मुताल्लिक़ आता है कि उन्होंने इब्न सबा को आग में जला दिया। मोहम्मद बिन अबी बकर के हवाले से भी तारीखी रिवायात में है कि उन्हें कत्ल करके गधे की खाल में लपेट कर जला दिया गया। क्या आग में जलाना शरई सजा है?
So as far as punishing people by burning them, we know that the Prophet explicitly stopped this in his own times. So I cannot say in any way that his own grandson, or maybe his son-in-law, if you're talking about Caliph Ali, he would have done so, because this is something that is ascribed to, I think, other people as well. So I think in my own understanding that these historical narratives, they need to be examined historically as well, because we know that the Prophet did stop people from burning them, from being burnt after they are punished. And of course, one thing that can still be said about that at times not everything that the Prophet has said would have reached people. So there could have been both possibilities. And remember that historically burning or giving punishment in other ways is something that has been I mean, not specified in many cases. So for example, when you punish some people, there is no mention of the jail punishment in the Quran. So this does not mean that jail punishment itself is against the Quran. So there are different ways of punishing people which people have invented. But about burning people, as I said, the Prophet, not the Quran, the Prophet is reported to have said that this should not be done, because burning people is only the prerogative of God, and he will do that in the hereafter. And so the Prophet likened this burning to the punishment of hell, and he said that people should not give it. So I think that these historical narratives, they need to be re-examined, whether they are actually telling the truth or not. Or let us say, or let us suppose that, for example, if we do think that there is a kernel of truth in them, then all that we can say is that the people who did so were not aware of this prophetic commandment or his directive.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, Riwayat suggests that Dajjal will have fake heaven and hell with him. Does this symbolize that the wealth system of Western societies and poor situations of Islamic countries where everyone wants his heaven, which is the visa of West?
So I think this is, I mean, this is probably too simplified or oversimplification that the Antichrist or Dajjal would have his own hell in heaven. These are narratives that we at our own institute are currently, at the moment, we're working on these narratives, and they are very vast in number. So some of our scholars have devoted themselves to look at these narratives. I think that we should wait for what they come up with as far as their explanation is concerned. I, for the moment, am not in a position to explain this part of the narrative, which says that Dajjal will have heaven and hell in his own hands. Obviously, there is something figurative about it, but you just cannot interpret these narratives in isolation. There has to be a holistic interpretation, and let us wait for the answers to come up. And inshallah, hopefully soon they'll be in front of you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, in Islamic jurisprudence, baghi is categorized into two main types. Baghi al-mu'ahada, this refers to rebellion against a legitimate ruler or authority where the rebels have a valid grievance or claim, but their method of addressing it is illegitimate. And then baghi al-mufsida. This type of rebellion involves a complete rejection of the legitimate authority and the rule of law, often accompanied by violence, destruction, and chaos. In which of these categories does the recent protest of a political party in Pakistan fall, and what is the punishment in Islamic Sharia?
So you see, first of all, you have to understand that Islamic jurisprudence the way it works is that it interprets certain verses of the Quran, and then whenever it sees that there are uh, moments of silence or places of silence, it does ijtihad and categorizes people. So, I mean, instead of looking at Islamic jurisprudence, I think it's much more easier and much more direct to look at the Quran. What does the Quran say about rebellion, or what does the Quran say about rising against authority? So the Quran says that in all cases, if you have to protest, if you have to present your own case, that is something that is your democratic right, and everyone is allowed to do so. But any violence, any vandalism, any destruction, that is something which is against the law. The Prophet himself prohibited that. We know the Quran has done so as well. In the cases of battles where it is said that you will not uproot the trees also wherever you pass for the sake of your own personal gains. So this is the guideline that we have, that we can demonstrate our dislike of a certain situation, but that has to be peaceful. It must not disrupt life in general. It must not block roads or ways, because this is like creating problems for the common man, for the masses, which have no role in these situations. So peaceful protests, they are something that can always be condoned. But other than that, to rise against authority, to rebel against authority, and to hoodwink the law, to bypass the law, to break the law, that is something that is not allowed. So this is what we can say in principle. Whether this recent protest is something that conform to this is not, is for everyone to decide. I mean, I can just outline the principles which the Quran has mentioned, that vandalism, destruction, and disobeying the law in any way is not allowed. So if this happened, it should not have happened. And if this does not happen, and the media has reported something else, of course, then we are not in a position to decide. All that we can say is in principle what I just outlined.
Similar to that question, the next question asks, is civil disobedience allowed in Islam for your demands from the government? It is like a non-violent protest, but we reject to obey the government fully.
So for that civil disobedience, I mean, there are a couple of conditions. First, there has to be a single leader who must be having the confidence of the majority behind him. I mean, he just cannot be a person who starts asking people that, well, we are not going to let the system work. I mean, if there has to be a change, first of all, then if there is a democratic way of changing the government, then this civil disobedience is not allowed in the first place. This is only allowed when you are in an autocratic rule, or in a despotic rule, in a dictatorial rule, in which there is no democratic way to dislodge the government. So first of all, that has to be understood. Secondly, such civil disobedience can only be, I mean, you can take part into it when you know there's one leader who is doing so, and that also is the situation that he is in majority. I mean, he, or let's say the person who's leading this civil disobedience, is in fact enjoying the majority of the masses of the country. And in that case also, you cannot lift arms, of course. If that is the case, then you're waging war, and that takes the place of an armed rising. Then there is a fourth condition, if that has to be met, and that is that the person must be establishing his rule in an independent piece of land, and then he can pick up arms. But if that is not the case, and it's a peaceful civil disobedience, which means that we will not obey the government and not let it work, then, as I said, it has to be, first of all, following these steps, that this can only take place in regimes which are dictatorial, in which you cannot dislodge the government in the normal way, which is through the ballot.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Noshad Shafkat, please go ahead.
Dr. Sab, just a follow-up on what you were talking about right now. But does the government to whom we owe allegiance have to be a de jure legitimate government, or just a de facto legitimate government would also be entitled to the same observance by the citizens?
I mean,
That is
even
my follow-up question to this.
so even a would be sufficient. As I said, that any civil uprising, it also needs to conform to the fact which the Prophet was once asked, and that is that the Prophet was asked that, can we rebel against our ruler? So that rebellion is something about which the Prophet had said that illa an tarawha kufran bawah, which means that they must exhibit open disbelief, which means that the open denial of Islamic beliefs has to be exhibited by them for that. Other than that, if you think that this is not the case, then even then, in that case, you should not be doing it, even if it is a de facto government.
So can I ask another question, Mariam?
Okay, go ahead.
Right. Dr. Saab, any update on the latest position of Ghamidi Saab on raising of the finger when sitting in namaz? I think some time ago you said that he had recently put forward a new position of
Yes,
his.
sir. I think that he has, communicated to our editorial staff to update his book, Mizan, and I have still not been able to directly ask this question to him, but I have heard him say that this basically is an ancient form of it's like a substitute, it's like an expression of of supplicating before the Almighty. So when you're raising your hand, because the Attahiyat position basically is a position or a posture of the prayer in which you supplicate before the Almighty, you invoke the Almighty. So this is like a substitute of that. Instead of raising your hands, you don't, of course, change the posture of the prayer. You just point your finger of head upwards, signifying that you are actually invoking him or praying to him that, God, I have certain requests to make, and these are my requests.
Sir, what about some people tapping their finger continuously?
I mean, this
something
is how
else?
people have come to understand that. It's not, first of all, you have to understand, it's not a mandatory posture of the prayer. It's not something that is, that you have to do at all cost. It's just something that is recommended. And whether you do it for the whole of the prayer, whether you do it for the part of that you're sitting, and that too, part of that sitting, for example, a couple of seconds, is all up to you. There's nothing that has been specified that the finger has to be raised in the entire posture for the entire length. It could be for the entire length if you feel like, or it could be for some seconds or maybe a couple of minutes. Because as I said, it signifies that you are basically raising your hands in prayer.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. The next question asks, in Surah 5, Ayah 48, a part of it says, to teach among you, we have prescribed a law and a minhaj. If Allah willed, He would have made you one ummah, but that He may test you in what He has given you, to strive as in a race in good deeds.
Right.
And then by quoting this ayah, a scholar was saying that Christians don't need to convert to Islam to be saved. They can remain in their ummah while believing Prophet Muhammad as a true prophet. They can remain in their ummah and keep following their own sharia of their ummah, as there are multiple ummahs, Allah has said.
So I think this would not be a correct conclusion or a right inference, because you see, you just cannot draw an inference from just one instance of the Quran. Wherever this issue of people who are non-believers is expressed in the Quran, there are many verses on the contrary which say, for example, Ya ayyuhal kitab aminu bima nazzalna, O people of the book, profess faith on which we have revealed, which refers to the Quran, or verses to this effect are found elsewhere in the Quran. So one thing is clear, that this verse is not in any way to be singled out. Now, as far as this verse is concerned, it has a particular context. I think the words are لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا. For every one of you, we have given a sharia and a minhaj. And the purpose is that we would like to test you. And then it said that فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ, that the real test is that how far you can go in doing good deeds. So this is something that is, said to people, that whatever they think to be correct, if they think that their own version of the truth is correct, they are free to choose, and follow it. And some other person might be following something else. But what he is doing is he's doing out of his own choice and sincerity. So God is actually giving you this leverage in this verse, that wherever you end up after sincerely searching for the truth is something that you should do. And because we have given a way of life to every people, to every denomination of people regarding their own prophet. So it in no way says that God has actually planned for you to remain different. All it says is that if you choose to remain different as a result of your own personal sincerity, and you really think that this is the correct version, then at least you must excel in that version, which means that you must be true to your own understanding, true to your own standards. So this is one area which actually gives us this leverage. But other than that, this would be a wrong conclusion to say that the Almighty is actually telling you that in spite of being convinced of the opposite, you still should remain on what you are convinced, what you have found your forefathers to be on. So because, as I said, in the beginning of Surah Baqarah, Aminu bima nazal, آمنوا بما أنزلت مصدقا لما معكم, I think near the 39th or 40th verse, which is found in Surah Baqarah. I say that people of the book, you have to profess faith on what has been revealed to me. The Prophet is telling them. And then at other instances, it is said that this was the book that was sent to you and you were waiting for this Prophet. And you should not be the first people to deny it. لا تكونوا أول كافر به. How can you be the first to deny him, whereas you have found his mention in your own scriptures? So I think that these are enough. This is enough evidence to tell us that the people of the book of the prophetic times, they were actually waiting for a new prophet, a new book. And when it came, they were the people who, instead of welcoming that book and the prophet, they ended up denying them. So this is an evidence that is fraught in the Quran, that is found in a number of places in the Quran. So that would not be a correct conclusion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, what was the nature of conflict between Ali and Muawiyah?
Muawiyah.
Muawiyah?
Yeah. Well, this was a historical debate. I think history is something that we should leave itself to decide. Ali and Muawiyah, of course, they were vying for authority, and Muawiyah thought that Ali was not the rightful caliph, and instead of assuming instead of assuming the caliphate, he should have first seen how the Caliph Usman, who was previously installed, he was brutally murdered. So he did not accept his caliphate and said that how come he was given this caliphate, or he chose to be the caliph, and the rest of them supported this decision, whereas the people who did so were the ones who had actually ended up killing Usman. And so actually he was challenging the authority of Caliph Ali, and this took a very ugly turn, and we know that a battle was fought between the two. And from then onwards, also we can say that there was a big turn in Islamic history in which democratic rule was overturned, and it actually ended up in a dynastic rule. And from Muawiyah onwards, we know right up to 1924, when the caliphate was annulled by Mustafa Kemal, we had a whole series of dynastic rulers, the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Fatimids, the Idrisids, and finally the Ottomans. So this was it's like a watershed or a turning point in the history of Islamic political science, I would say, in which after the first four caliphs, the whole caliphate turned from a democratically elected and installed government to a despotic one, or a monarchy, I would say.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, in Surah 59, Ayah 9, it tells a thing which is unbelievable. And he says the ayah, which is about when people were immigrating to Medina, and then Allah asked to adopt the faith, love those who immigrate to them, and have no jealousy in their hearts for that which they have been given, and so on. Should I continue with the ayah's translation, or
No,
move?
it's okay. I know that.
So the
what is the
question
question?
asks, how can one have such a clean heart and be that giving, loving? This seems like ideal angels can do this, but how can a human do this?
It's like a standard which the Almighty wants us to set before ourselves. It's a very tough task. It's a tall order. But that is why the Quran says that it should be aspired for. You should try to come as close as possible to have a clean heart. La taj'al fi qulubina ghillan lillazina amanu. That, oh God, make our hearts bereft of any malice that we might have for our brethren who are migrating to us. So I know it's a difficult thing, and all of us know that, but that is what life is all about. You have difficult standards set before you, and the purpose is not to actually emulate those standards or reach right up to those standards, but to come as close as possible.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, is it obligatory for different Islamic countries to be part of a single political order, like the way it was till the Abbasid dynasty? Some say it is the establishment of Caliphate. Is it religious? Is it a religious obligation or an option?
It's not a religious obligation at all. Yes, if they think that they can get together for political purposes or for the convenience of administration, they can do that. But nowhere in the Quran is this religious obligation or religious duty that all Muslim governments, independent countries, their heads should get at one place and have their countries united. It's not an obligation at all. But yes, if they want it to happen, this is something that they can freely choose, and if their own countries support their will and they all come together in the form of an Islamic bloc, then there's nothing that stops that. But as I said, this is not a religious obligation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Calling for more questions. If we don't have any more, then we may end the session early. You may raise your hand or type them in the chat. This might be the first Ask session that we end a bit early.
Mhm.
Oh, we have one more. Noshad Shafqat, please go ahead.
Dr. just mentioned about the caliphate of Hazrat Ali. Of course, he's known amongst the four, rightly guided caliphs. But there is a dispute. Muawiyah raised the dispute. I was just listening to a clip of Ghamidi sir, raised a dispute as to the legitimacy of the election of Ali. Could you throw some light on that, sir?
So I think, as I said, that Muawiyah, he was the governor of Syria, which was like a huge territory at that time, and he thought that, Ali had not been installed as a democratically elected person because he was installed by people who were there in the Arab territory and mostly in Medina, and without realizing that the Islamic polity had spread far and wide beyond Arabia into other countries as well. So today's Syria is different from the Syria of the times of the Prophet. It was a very vast territory. So he objected to this, that a wider electoral college, to speak in modern terms, should have been consulted. Only the people of Medina were consulted, or at best, people close to that area in Arabia. And also the fact that instead of first resolving who killed Usman and finding out the truth behind it, Ali, instead of doing that, he actually was installed into his position by the very people who were responsible for this carnage. So that is what his point of view was.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question asks, what is the difference between tayyib and halal? Some people say that halal is not enough and you should also strive for tayyib food, which means healthy, and junk food is non-tayyib. Is this correct?
I mean, this is just this is not correct at all. The Quran has said, at one instance in Surah Ma'idah, it says, "Yas'alunaka maza uhilla lahum." They ask you that what exactly is halal, and the answer is, "Kul uhilla lakum at-tayyibat," that all wholesome food is halal to you. So this is basically asking this question, that what exactly is the type of the food that we should be allowed to eat. So the answer given by the Quran is tayyib, everything which is tayyib lit-ta'am, which means that all food which is appropriate for eating as far as human nature is concerned. So that is why the Quran has not given us a list of things. It's just said that you know what tayyibat are. So tayyibat actually refer to those types of food which are in consonance, in harmony with human nature. And because this human nature is something of a collective phenomenon, you don't need to, signify and single out every single person to find out what is tayyib. It's like a collective decision by humanity, because their nature, if it's not perverted, it comes to say the same decision that we should not be eating savage animals, we should not be eating animals which are carnivorous. So that is what the Quran has replied. Okay. Uhilla lakum at-tayyibat. Everything which is tayyib lit-ta'am, tayyib for eating, appropriate for human nature to consume, is allowed to you. So, and also remember that the Quran does not use these words as terms. So the word halal became a juristic term much later when the jurists, they actually started to compile their own works, and they started to make categories that this is halal, this is makruh, this is makruh tahrimi, etc., etc. The Quran does not use these words as a term. They actually, the Quran actually uses them as a simple, the simple linguistic Arabic words. Uhilla lakum just means allowed to you, something which is fine for you. So that is how we should also understand that a lot of things in the Quran are talked about in a simple way. And we should always look back and not get ourselves confused by, first of all, entangling ourselves that, well, this word was made a term. So remember, the Quran never made it a term. It was the jurists who made it a term, assigned it a particular meaning, and then through that meaning, we are now looking back through that lens at the Quran. So that is something that causes this difficulty. The Quran uses the word harrama, the Quran uses for the word halal, halal, haram, as simple words, which means to prohibit something and to allow something. And tayyib, of course, is a common Arabic word, which when used in this context means something which is appropriate for human nature to consume.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next person asks, can we say Ali's Khilafat was established when a large part of territory didn't even accept him because it was the rebels who assassinated Osman that projected him as a caliph?
So can we say what? That
Ali's Khilafat was even established to begin with.
So, this is the cause of dispute. I am not in a position to resolve this dispute 14 centuries later. What I can say is that people who existed in those times were, they were on the wrong side of each other because of the fact that one group of people thought that the electoral college, if you use modern terms, the proper electoral college was not used, and the other people say that, yes, it was used. So, but in all probability, a study of history does give us this, I would say, strong impression that it seems that the electoral college that should have been considered was actually not considered, and instead of having a wider recourse to other territories who had become part of the Muslim empire, and they were not consulted, and people just there in Medina or across that area were consulted. And so we can say that this was perhaps a lapse on the part of the other people, but that lapse is not something that was done intentionally in any case. It was done as maybe a mistake that, any person can end up doing. So it's just a question of what you think is right. But as I said, 14 centuries later, it is difficult to give this verdict. But at best, I think what we can say is that perhaps this is something, what in my personal opinion, that goes in favor of Amir Muawiyah, that he was quite correct in the fact that the nature of this whole installation of the new prophethood or new caliphate or a new caliph should have involved a wider consultation, which was not done for whatever reason that we are not very particularly sure of.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We have time for one last question. Noshad Shafat, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. I'm sorry for butting in, but I wouldn't like to let you go to learn from your wisdom. Dr. Saab, recently there was a clip by Dr. Farooq and Dr. Zakir Naik stating that the urine and the fecus of the halal animal is not a najis or some other term that you use. What is your view?
Could I just interrupt? I'm not being able to hear you properly. If you could either come closer to your mic.
Yes, Dr. Saab, can you hear me now?
Yes, very clearly now.
Yes. Dr. Saab, recently I said that I'm sorry for butting in, but I wouldn't like to lose any precious time leaving you alone. But Dr. Zakir Naik in a recent clip said that the urine and the fecus of those animals which are halal is not najis or some other word that he used for being impure as compared to the other animals. What is your view on that, sir?
That is not correct. Something to be najis is enough for us if it comes out of, it's part of your feces or the urine. That itself is something which is impure. Whether it comes out of a allowed animal or a legally allowed animal or not, that is besides the point. the fact that their bowels or what they secrete from their both the sabils, as the Arabic term goes, regardless of whether the animal is halal or haram, we know from our nature, because remember, what right and wrong in this matter is something that has been left to human nature, and our human nature tells us that regardless of the animal that or the nature of that animal that is producing those feces or urine, they have to be, they have to be najis, they are impure, and we have that feeling of abhorrence for them. So that feeling of abhorrence for them is the one that decides whether something is correct or not. And I think that is equally there for an animal which is allowed, and also equally there for an animal which is not allowed.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. And thanks to all the participants for coming and asking their questions. Thank you, Dr. Saleem, for clarifying a lot of these things and answering our questions. Inshallah, we'll see you all tomorrow in another session of textual